I'll let you know that it would be wonderful if you choose to present in the language that you are most comfortable with. And if that is Ukrainian, that's perfect and wonderful. It's helpful for our interpreters. It's helpful for the audience, for you to be comfortable in your own skin, so to speak, and in your own presentation. So we encourage you to take that to heart. If you have any questions about the interpretation function, you can please put those in the chat and we'll try to help with those. Otherwise, I think we're ready to go for our last roundtable today, which is entitled Art, Symbol, and Media, Ukrainian Resilience and Resistance in Wartime. So it's my pleasure to introduce our first speaker, Mykola Homeniuk. Mykola, wonderful to see you. And I'll say a few words about Professor Homeniuk, and then he will take the floor. I'll remind our presenters that we're asking you to keep your presentations to 15 minutes so that we can have time at the end for discussion, question and answer, and so on. So Mykola Homeniuk is sociologist, geographer, and theater maker. He defended his PhD thesis in sociology at VN Karazin Kharkiv National University. And currently he is associate professor at the Department of Geography and Ecology at Kherson State University, where he teaches human geography. He also runs an independent theater company, Totem Theater Lab. Dr. Homeniuk's current research is dedicated to ethnic minorities and transformation of war memorials, modern toponymic practices, and public space in wartime. And we are really looking forward to his talk today, which is Russian symbolic policy and Ukrainian resistance in the occupied territories of Ukraine. So Dr. Homeniuk, the floor is yours.
Дуже дякую. Вітаю усіх.
Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. Let me share my screen with the presentation. So I will now be speaking about Russian symbolic politics and Ukrainian resistance in the occupied territories of Ukraine. So I've spent 7 months under occupation, and the majority of the data are the data of my personal observations, partially the pictures which you will see were done by me. So first, since the beginning of the war, since the beginning of the full-scale invasion, I would say, of Russia in Ukraine, even the symbolic war has been waged as well, a symbolic war. The object of my analysis was the toponymic policy, the use of different toponyms, that is, the external advertisement, branding of the territory, and also the use of different state symbols. So I would begin instantly with the conclusions, because simultaneously, during these times in 2022 and now, in the occupied territories, we still see the war between the 4 vectors, 4 discourses. 3 of them are presented by Russian Federation, the side of the aggressor, and one of the discourses is the discourse of the Ukrainian resistance in the occupied territories. So let us start with the Russian symbolic discourses. The first discourse, I named it formally as an imperial discourse, because in the end, during the first days of the war and the first months of the full-scale invasion, we saw the plots of imperial symbolic space, like the MP of State Duma, the Parliament of Russia, Sheremet, offered to restore Tavria gubernia in the historical borders. This is the administrative territorial unit of Russian Empire, which included Crimea, Kherson, and Zaporizhia regions. It was perceived with huge enthusiasm. They even hang billboards, and famous Russian singers and other civil activists took part in that. At this picture, you can see how the rock singer Chicherina is hanging the billboard, 220 years of Tavria region, and she gives an interview. It was really loudly disseminated. Unfortunately, there is no audio. So you could see her short speech, where the historian can find lots of mistakes, because not all of the cities were created in this region during the times of Russian Empire. And this discourse of Tavria and the Empire discourse was also in the branding. It was used in the names of the enterprises, media. For instance, here you can see several Telegram channels, even lots of them. Tavria was the state occupational TV channel and the state energy company in Zaporizhia region. And even in Zaporizhia region, they began to issue the plates of state registration for the cars, for the vehicles, where the part of the plate was just covered, where it was written UA, Ukraine, and the flag of Ukraine. It was just covered with a sticker with the letters TVR, which meant Tavria. So the notion of Tavria existed in the Ukrainian space as well, in fact. And Ukrainian Tavria was substantially different from Russian one, because first of all, it was the name of a mental region, which is more associated not with the empire past, but with Tavria steppes among the population of the Black Sea and Azov Sea. Here you can see the research of one of the Ukrainian geographs, which shows the mental borders, how Tavria is perceived in the opinions of the Ukrainian population. This is the region which takes almost 1/3 of Ukraine, and including the eastern one. And also they offered to use in this imperial vector the name of Novorossiya. They used it in the name of Telegram channels as well, in the titles of different propagandist slogans, and so on. You can see the map where they offered to name Novorossiya the part of Ukraine, though historically Novorossiya part was much smaller. It was only part of Dnipropetrovsk, Kherson and Zaporizhia regions, some of the parts. And in the public symbolic space, this imperial vector had the dimension, the use of a flag, a banner, a so-called the one with the Jesus Christ. You can see the armored vehicle, which has both the Gonfalon, that is with Jesus Christ, and the Russian flag, and the Soviet flag as well. So Gonfalon was used for the first time, and it was in fact erected over Kherson administration, and only then they erected the Russian one. Also, they paid a lot of attention to the external advertisements and billboards with different historical figures like Potemkin, Suvorov, Ushakov, Pushkin, and so on. This is one of the reports where they name Grigory Potemkin, whose remnants were stolen from St. Catherine's Church from Kherson, and also they used the coat of arms of the empire period. Here you can see the coat of arms of Kherson region, which was done basing upon the empire coat of arms of Kherson city, and the coat of arms of Zaporizhia region, which is based upon the coat of arms of the times of empire. In the same way, the next vector was the Soviet vector. in the symbolical space. The active use, and is still, in fact, it is relevant, the toponymics of the Soviet period. You can see the map from the General Staff of Russian Federation, where you can find non-existing names like Dnipropetrovsk, which does not exist anymore, Kirovograd, let alone Artyomovsk, instead of Bakhmut, which is now constantly seen in the news. And also they use their imperial names like Tsurupinsk, which is now Oleshki, and they even said Alyoshki, which is an Empire Russian name of the city. Besides that, they also used in the symbolical space, they used the renaming in the Soviet style, of course. In lots of the cities, especially in Mariupol, they almost brought back all the Soviet toponymics, not only Mariupol, but also in Melitopol and partially in Kherson region. And also they brought back the symbolics of the Soviet period to the symbolic space. This is the picture which was done after the occupation, where we had such a paradox. You can see the name Kherson State Marine Academy, named after Admiral Ushakov, and suddenly the Soviet medals of the Red Banner and the Friendship of Nations. This Soviet vector was still used, by the way, during the public speeches. This is the meeting of the government of Kherson region, the occupational government, of course, where we can see the domination of the Soviet banner, the banner of the victory, but still, according to the Soviet banner, this picture was done in December. And also the symbolic space, we saw the comeback of Soviet symbols. Well, it was not that massive, but still substantial. The monuments to Lenin, which was first erected in Henichesk, then in Novakakhovka, as well as in Luhansk region, and in Kharkiv region as well, where they restored Lenin's monuments. They glorified some of the Soviet achievements of these territories, like this is the billboard from Kherson, where they suggest for the city dwellers to be proud of the fact that in the Soviet Union, they created Kherson region, and Kherson has gained such a huge status. And also in this symbolic space, what else? They suggested and restored, renovated the administrative territorial composition of these areas. They liquidated hromadas, that is communities, and they brought back the so-called rayons, which are districts, which were, by the way, liquidated after decentralization. The Kherson residents were ridiculing and mocking that. The villages in the Russian media were called derevnya, which sounds really funny, like in the Russian type. We never say derevnya here. The next vector is, in fact, the Russian federal vector, and it was not dominating. During the last months, it began to take the leading part. They offered a new, authentic Russian symbolics. You can see the coat of arms and the banner of Kharkiv region, the new symbolics of Kakhovka and Hola Pristan. But even different military correspondents, reporters, and propagandists were constantly complaining that Russia does not use the Russian map, that we can see on a permanent basis either Empire or Soviet symbols. Where is Russia then? They asked. And according to my observations, that is true. In the public space, Empire or imperial and Soviet symbols were dominating. At the time, there was a certain resistance in the public space, Ukrainian resistance. I have the pictures from Kherson region. Now it is prohibited to take pictures of them, but you could see all of those covered road signs which had the aim to, in fact, confuse the Russian occupiers, which used the obsolete Soviet maps. You can see that these signs, road signs, along the road of Odessa-Kiev were covered, the same happened in any of the regions where the battles were conducted or where the warfare was expected. The same happened in the symbolic space. For a long time, we could see the domination of yellow and blue colors. If the Soviet banners appeared, like the victory banner, there can be lots of facts when they were just taken down, though it was very dangerous, including Kherson city. The main banner at the Eternal Flame was taken down for 3 times. The same happened in Enerhodar, Mariupol, Hola Pristan. As same concerned the monuments. This was the monument created by the local residents. This is the place of the battle where the territorial defense warriors of Ukraine perished, and they created a kind of a military memorial for them. And this is the symbolic space which is used with the aim to demonstrate the intentions of the Ukrainian party. You can see this was the picture recently done in Kherson. We have the billboards there which show what next. Then we'll have Kalanchak, then we'll have Chaplinka, then we'll have Melitopol, and so on. So concluding, I'd like to say that this triple character in the symbolic space, both physical and informational, as for me, impacted badly and negatively onto the plans of the aggressor, because it did not pose any geographical objective for the usual soldier in this campaign. So this so-called special military operation does not have a geographical objective. Someone considers that if this is the imperial war, we need to get to Paris. But if it's a Soviet war, we need to get to Berlin. In other options, well, it's obvious. This is the campaign without geographical aim and without an objective. Summing it up, I may say that not only physical plans, not only military plans were not achieved, but even on the occupied territories, the Russians failed to implement the full control over the public space. This resistance is ongoing. This yellow stripe movement on different objects, fences, walls, is still there. It is working. It used to be at the occupied areas and is still there. I do hope that I stick to the regulations, to the time limits. Thank you for your attention.
Mykola, thank you so much. Your timing was perfect, and this material is just amazing. I mean, it's such unique material. And thank you for sharing it with us. And I know we're going to have a very interesting discussion. And I'm very eager to know if you have any publications coming out or that you're working on now based on this really terrific, unique material. Time now to move on to our next presenter. And that is Irina Baltazyuk. I'm going to make sure Irina, oh yes, you're here, wonderful. So I'll just say a few words of introduction, Irina. And Irina, since 2018, has been working on her PhD thesis at the National Academy of Fine Arts and Architecture. She's also an artist herself and a public figure. She founded the Art NGO research platform, Mohonshu, I hope I'm saying that right, you can correct me, whose goal is to support Ukrainian artists. Her main research interests are in the study of the language of symbols in works of modern art, and she also covers several related disciplines such as visual communication, lexicon of modern art, interpretation of artworks, modifications of universal symbols on national ground, etc. Her presentation today is entitled Artists at War, a new connotation of an artistic symbol in Ukrainian art. And we're really looking forward to your presentation, Irina. Please, the floor is yours.
Доброго вечора. Мене чутно?
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Дякую щиро за
So,
презентацію.
thank you once again for
Продемонструвати
introducing me.
зараз
And let me share my
давно
screen.
робила.
It's been a while since I've shared my screen
Мгм.
in the previous period.
Так, секундочку.
Give me a second.
Так, видно, так?
So, hopefully, you can see my screen.
Чудово. Доброго
Wonderful.
Мене звати
So, good
Ірина.
afternoon. My
Дякую
name
за
is Irina
представлення.
Baltazuk, and thank you for
Наступного
introducing me.
слайду.
Let me start with the next
В
slide.
рамках
So,
студентської
as
програми
part
спеціалізації
of
на
the
рівні
non-residential
Індіана
fellowship program of
проєкт
Indiana University,
«Символи
I'm working on the
музичної
project Artist at War, a new
української
connotation of an
мистецтва».
artistic symbol in
Чудово,
Ukrainian
що ви
art,
знайомі
which is
дисертаційною
also
роботою.
consistent with my
В рамках
dissertation
цієї роботи
research.
я
Now,
досліджую
in the
окремі
frames of this program, I'm
українсько-мистецькі композиції
researching
воєнного періоду.
the Ukrainian artists of the war
Вважаю, що
period.
робота
I'm
української
learning
мистецтвознавців
the
дуже цікава і
characteristics of the Ukrainian mentality reproduced in the art works. In the process of my research, I identifying the symbols that promote the national unity by outlining the way how the ethnic identity is being perceived based on the art pieces created today. The symbols in the works of contemporary artists, despite being manifested as the result of tragic events for the Ukrainian people, are reproduced around such pillars as persistence, awareness of the past, resilience, sustainability, identity, vitality, continuity, self-awareness, self-identification, etc. The individual consciousness of Ukrainians is evidenced in particular by the author's originality, which is linked to the collective, that is, ancestral experience. This suggests that it is the symbol that underlies the existence of culture, which forms the path to a free and democratic society that we are currently fighting for. In our vocabulary, Ukrainian art operates not only with popular conceptual means, but also with cultural codes that are as much enriched by national symbols as they are damaged by the artificial Soviet consciousness, which is now being abandoned. We see this in the art, in everyday life, and the mentality, which is being transformed into new consciousness, cleansed from the Soviet taint. The contemporary art, it provides more it is an integral part of the global social-cultural context. Now, the symbols associated with national building process, with reinforcing the identity, a sense of belonging to the nation, are as following. The unbreakability, the cockerel, the locker, the suitcase, tractor, carpet, etc. Then home, the symbols of security of home, loss of home, refugee, the symbol of earth, and that's represented by the place of power, the archetype of shadow, the nature, the archetype of nature in disaster, then stone, that's the form of the monument or stone woman, symbols of foreign women, water, the water is represented through fountain and tears. Hero, that's the cyborg warrior, warrior women. Hero is the heavenly hundred, ghost of Kiev, angel, etc. The symbol of the tree of life, that's reproduced through memory and information. A symbol of person, reproduced through community, through crowd and instinct. Song, that's prayer and lullaby. Game, that's joke and irony. Also, the symbols of cross, icon, ornament, food, protective amulets, bird, a dove of peace and war, a symbol of word, dance, like a ballet, a symbol of light, and many others. Now, these are the main symbols that we can see most often. Since the beginning of the war, I've been compiling the archive of the works by Ukrainian artists created during the war and developed tools for their analysis. Over 8 months ago, I joined the research and the establishment of the National Media Library of Ukrainian Art created during the war under the Ministry of Culture and Information Policy of Ukraine. I'm a member of the working group of experts working on the archive, and this experience gives me a chance to expand the factual material I need for my analysis. And should we go deeper into the analysis of the changes that are taking place in the works of artists, I'm investigating the way the symbols have changed in their work. Any new symbols appeared, any ethnic symbols, any symbols that facilitate the national building process. These data have a great potential for research and require careful analysis. This is what I'm working on currently. The most impressive exhibit is the historical installation that was built out of people's desire to preserve cultural heritage. This monument is made of sandbags that hide an object of national importance, like enveloping it in layers of protective material. It's not a cultural symbol, but mm, in the public space of the European country, the monument became an art object, while on the territory of Ukraine is a necessary condition for survival, particularly for cultural facilities. This installation is a collective manifesto, an address to the international community. It was built in front of the Ukrainian pavilion and represents the contemporary national consciousness that took the form of the most impressive art object of the early 21st century. We've already seen a similar kind of manifesto in the work of the famous Linart artist that became known for wrapping some important buildings in fabric, whose latest work, Arc, the Arc in Paris, was created posthumously in 2021. This language of expression, when in public space a cultural value disappears under a close layer of protective material, helps to draw additional public attention to the problems of society. However, the Ukrainian context gave this language a special meaning, as it not only started the countdown of possible disappearance, but instantly turned it into the present day, into the present. The historical installation is represented in the work of artists working in different media, in graphics, painting, sculpture, illustration, new media, and video art. There could be arts by Mariana Maslova, protected by Halina Andrusenko, Daria Lutsishina, and many other works. Furthermore, should we consider the historic installation as a symbol of indestructibility? That could be the prototype of a monument, a stone woman, a tree of life. And this is represented in many works of the artists, the skiff Hulepole and the myth of the Ukrainian steppe. The symbols of indestructibility take a special place after the 24th of February, and they appeared due to tragic events that resulted in the survival of certain object or a phenomenon. For example, a monument to Shevchenko in Borodenka that was destroyed by Russians. It has become one of the symbols like that. Then we can mention the following symbols: the tractor, the case, and many others. All of them, it's all about the survival. And it has become one of the Ukrainian resilience. It symbolized the ability to go through inhuman trials. When asked how they were doing, Ukrainians were answered, I'm holding up like a locker in Borodyanka. This unbreakable locker complemented the National Museum of the Revolution of Dignity, as the cockerel has become one of the key symbols of invincibility, which also refers to a symbol of national unity and identity. The history of painted ceramics has given the symbol a special ethnic sound, like a certain stage of revival which took place after the tragedy in Borodyanka, where the indestructible ceramic cockerel comes from. The tractor, as one of the main symbols of indestructibility, gained a new meaning during the war and is characterized by the symbol of a hero who faces a greater enemy and wins not only because of his agility, maneuverability, and small size, but also because of his intelligence, determination, and courage. These are the traits of Ukrainians that have been underlined during the war. Continue working on the far, cultivating the land was minds that it's also about courage. Sergei Kondratyuk and his artists, and Yuri Shapoval, Mikhailo Zavalny, and Vladislav Rebustan, and many other artists use that symbol. The suitcase as a symbol of invincibility has also found expression in many works of contemporary art. In this context, well, we have to mention the 10-hour-long performance by Maria Matyashova. A suitcase as a symbol of losing one's home is a symbol of faith and struggle because a person finding the strength to leave his or her home does everything to survive, to protect children and loved ones, while keeping faith to return home. The suitcase has always been a symbol of war and losses, but it also serves as a symbol of identity. The most important archetype, that's the home, and it's also as a search of self-identity. For Ukrainians to leave their home, it's almost impossible. Therefore, the home is a sacred word, a place where you've born has this energy. It enriches a person with the memories of their families. And we have Danilo Movchan, who used this symbol, Roman Dish, and many others. The return to the origins of culture is carried out through the modernization of the archetypal Ukrainian symbols that are not only important in time, but also become part of everyday life. Uh, the, this symbol is used in the words by Andrei Bludov, Liza Yablunska, Polina Kuznetsova, and his performances, and also in the works of many others. Home security is unstable, is something unstable in the realities of the war. The rule of two walls is designed just is used as a self-calming. A state that is skillfully visualized in the installation The Rule of Two Walls by Yulia Zakharova. Home, and especially its loss, it gives rise to another symbol, that is the loss of the home. Refugee and internally displaced persons, there are new concepts which are represented in the symbols of nakedness, devastation, and exhaustion. This is which is showed by Anatoly Tverdey in his installation. And then there is also another artist that are using this symbol. And the artists have tried to find more symbols in the forest, and they felt more protected because the invaders predominantly attacked the cities. We wanted to wrap ourselves in this common state like a blanket. In another work, through an installation of threads also created in land art, an artist, Irina Vorona, translated the myth of security in which we have been living for over 8 years into the plane of materiality. The shelter made of a web of threads is an allegory of today's myth of security because there is no safe place in Ukraine today. The art of war suggests that our home, our safe space, is no longer safe, but despite everything, Ukrainians cannot leave their homes. They will hold their ground, knee deep in the ground, cold, hungry, but strong and free at home. This is what we call a feeling of hope in the Ukrainian context. So thank you for your attention. You can see my contacts in the slide. I would be happy to answer all of your questions.
Thank you so much, Irina. Again, this is, excuse me, such fascinating material. I would like to move on to introducing, and thank you for sticking to time so perfectly, 15 minutes, thank you. We'll move on to our next presenter, who is Natalia Prihodkina. She's a specialist in comparative pedagogy, and for the last 10 years, she's been researching the development of students' media literacy. Her doctoral dissertation focuses on the development of students' media literacy in English-speaking countries including the United States. And obviously, Natalia's topic is especially pertinent now when we are looking at so much media disinformation and propaganda, particularly that Russia is waging against Ukraine. So Natalia's presentation this afternoon, this evening, is called Current Problems of Media Literacy and Combating Disinformation About the War in Ukraine. Natalia, please.
Дякую за слово. Так,
I
видно,
thank you. And hopefully you can see my presentation. Just a second.
видно, так?
Do you see my presentation?
Yes, it looks good. Thank you.
Так, дякую. Я перш за все хочу подякувати.
So, first of all, I'd like to express words of gratitude to the University of Indiana for the program, and special words of gratitude to you and to many others for moderating the conference. And it's a great honor for me to deliver my briefing during the conference. And thank you for these 2 days. I have received a great pleasure. And thanks to you, I have a lot of things to think, to process. So my briefing would be a continuation of the briefing by Ms. Huncharenko, and she delivered the briefing during the first panel. So my topic is all about current problems of media literacy and combating disinformation about the war in Ukraine. And first, I'd like to say that one of the dimensions of subversive activities in the informational sector is the spread of false information. Now, the Oxford English Dictionary has named post-truth as the word of 2016. Now, it describes the circumstances in which objective facts have less influence on the formation of the public opinion than emotions or personal beliefs. Now, this term has existed for a long time, but it became popular when UK exited the EU, and also after the US presidential election of 2016. It's kind of a disinformation is defined as the deliberate spread of the false or misleading content or the use of fake accounts or pages designed to manipulate or mislead users. The active phase of Russia's war against Ukraine has become the culmination of Russia's disinformation propaganda that started much earlier than February 24, 2022. Well, as early as Russia has been spreading disinformation all the time long. They've built their own ecosystem for this process, including TV channels, websites, could be blogs, and many others, and NGOs, and the Ukrainian Catholic Church of the Moscow Patriarchate.
2014 року саме Росія почала активно розвивати
So since 2014, Russia began to actively develop the rhetoric that is used even now during a full-scale war. Then, justifying the annexation of Crimea, the Kremlin talked about the so-called ethnic cleansing and other crimes allegedly committed by Ukraine against the Russian-speaking population. So I need to say that Russia is working by the schemes which are already checked. Though they are not just systematic, they can be adaptive. The systematicity is in the promotion of the key narratives, adaptivity in the use of the convenient informational reasons and channels of communications. The hybrid threat analysis group of the Ukrainian Crisis Media Center, and you can see the picture on the slide, identifies 3 separate stages of Russian propaganda in Ukraine with the following key directions, which you can see on the slide. I will not repeat them, you can see them now, just to save some time. According to Moscow's plan,
Мало йдеться
the information war was intended both to prepare the ground within Ukrainian society on the eve of armed intervention and to legitimize the invasion of the territory of a sovereign country in the eyes of Russians and the international audience in order to gain loyalty to the actions of the Russian authorities. In the book How Not to Become a Vegetable, the author Oksana Moroz singles out 7 commandments of Russian propaganda during the
Перше,
war. The first is to
тут мається
find
на
a
увазі,
crack
це
in society. What does it mean? It involves finding social, economic, racial, demographic, any other differences in society, which are then used to divide it. The next one is to create an audacious lie. The fake should be so amazing, so overwhelming that no one could believe that it could be invented at all. And when people believe in it, the consequences will already be disastrous. The third one, to add some truth. This refers to the combination of truth and lies, a well-known tool of Goebbels' propaganda. And Oksana Moroz says that the ratio in favor of the truth is only 15–20%, and accordingly 80–85% is in favor of lies. For example, a fact is combined with its arbitrary interpretation and subjective conclusions. The next commandment is to hide your hands. This means shifting responsibility to the different side of the conflict, or, as it is implemented in our information space today, creating pseudo-Ukrainian pages in social networks and hoax media. The next one is to attract useful idiots. Useful idiots are those who just mindlessly take the Kremlin's hostile messages and promote them to the target audience. These are the persons who can be manipulated for political purposes, and in Ukraine these are people who support the idea of Ruski Mir, the Russian world. The next one is to deny everything. The seventh is to play a long game. Russia tends to conduct long disinformation campaigns, investing huge resources in them for many years, and the developed system may not be obvious to us at first, because we don't seem to notice the immediate consequences, but it works on the principle of accumulation. So one of the main techniques of Kremlin propagandists is inconsistency, which should create a significant informational chaos in the minds of the audience, filled with a large number of various truths. Despite the external disorganization, this chaos is created according to a well-developed algorithm on which the entire disinformation machine works. Okay. The next point, you can see the image of the algorithm of the Kremlin's lies, which can be imagined as a closed cycle of various emotionally charged and contradictory information versions, with which the audience is constantly bombarded. Around, we can see only enemies. We did not do anything. It was a preventive strike. Where have you been for 8 years? Everything is the fault of the USA. So, given the legal restrictions on the dissemination of information, social networks have been the main platforms for broadcasting pro-Russian messages in Ukraine since the beginning of the war. That is, Facebook, Instagram, forums, chats, etc. And messengers, in particular Telegram, Viber, Messenger, etc. Facebook and Telegram remain still the most popular in this aspect. I must note that with the beginning of the full-scale invasion of Russia on the 24th of February, in the Ukrainian segment of Facebook and Telegram, as well as in Ukraine in general, there was a significant increase in patriotism and accordingly anti-Russian sentiments. All these could not but affect the forms that propaganda was forced to take in order to achieve its goal. In fact, I analyzed the materials that were published in Facebook groups and popular Telegram channels for the period from February 24th to the end of 2022 for the presence of propaganda in them, as well as to determine the methods that were used most often. First of all, fake images as a form of propaganda and the flourishing of Nazism in Ukraine. If we compare the features of information submission in 2021 and 2022, it can be noted that last year there was a significant number of fakes and public posts with undisguised signs of disinformation, which did not cause such a massive negative reaction from readers. Pro-Russian propaganda in 2022, faced with legal restrictions, apparently disapproving audience reaction and the risk of blocking propaganda accounts, became less overt and more covert. For this reason, crude and obvious information injects, for example, Photoshop fakes, with which propagandists generously filled their own and the world's information space, rarely made it to social networks and Telegram channels. As examples, here are several fake images that were created to convince viewers that the Nazis seized power in Ukraine. You can see it on the slide, like Azov Regiment with a flag with a swastika and so on. All of these images were made with the help of graphic editors, and if they got into the information space, then exclusively in the form of comments from bots, and were not taken seriously by readers. Then one of the propaganda trends of disinformation and propaganda in social media, that is Telegram and Facebook, during the war, was the formation of the image of the enemy using Nazi ideology and symbols, as well as relevant descriptions of the actions of the leadership, the armed forces, and the citizens of Ukraine. For instance, propaganda mentioned that the attack against Ukraine is a special operation aimed at denazification and demilitarization of Ukraine. These are the points that Vladimir Putin used in his message of February 24th. So simply put, no need to feel sorry for them. They are not people, but Nazis, for instance. For example, the trend about Nazis in power was manifested in publications about the tragedy in the building of trade unions in Odessa on the 2nd of May 2014, and stories about Ukrainian soldiers who allegedly dress up in Russian military uniform and commit terrible atrocities in order to blame them on Russia. The next one, that is justification for the invasion. These propaganda narratives lead us to another disinformation trend, the legitimization of Russia's invasion of Ukraine and the justification of the position that Russia is acting in self-defense. So this trend in general had a very interesting development because it is best characterized by a whole series of memes, which in fact emerged, and it was caused by Alexander Lukashenko's speech to justify Russian aggression against Ukraine. I'm saying that I will show you now, as you remember, you can see this quote on the slide now. And in this context, it is worth emphasizing what a great role humor plays in countering propaganda theses and points, especially in wartime, which allows you to express and reduce the level of aggression, anger, and tension to feel unity and solidarity with compatriots. And most importantly, the misinformation that was ridiculed ceases to work and turns into nonsense. The situation with Alexander Lukashenko's speech is the best example of that. Then united people and the artificiality of Ukrainian statehood. An important propaganda trend widely used in social media is the idea as if historical unity of Russians and Ukrainians took place. The ideological basis for this trend was given in particular by Vladimir Putin's article, which was published by him in July 2022. And this trend was most actively used in the media space in the form of soft propaganda of nostalgia for the times of the Russian Empire and the USSR, the publication of archival photos, often with old Soviet names, memories of the happy carefree times, of the unified past of Ukraine and Russia, etc. So very often such photos contain links to the corresponding pages in the banned social network Vkontakte, it is banned in Ukraine. Then conspiracy theories. The West is to blame for everything. Anti-Ukrainian rhetoric in the Russian information space was constantly accompanied by anti-Western and anti-NATO narratives. A danger that the West and NATO allegedly pose for Russia, since they seek to destroy Russia by destabilizing the post-Soviet region, primarily Ukraine. And according to Kremlin propagandists, Russia is surrounded by enemies from which it must defend itself. So the next propaganda trend of disinformation and propaganda in social media became the replication of various conspiracy theories, which you can see on the slide. And of course, I need to say that to some extent, all of those theories were reflected in the social media. Rarely we could see that in the radical forms. Mostly it is done within the comments from the people who seemed to understand the situation and finally wanted to open the eyes for the Ukrainians who naively believe that Russia started a war against Ukraine, but do not understand that this is only part of the big game of our common enemies, the West, anti-Semites, NATO, etc. So today, already in 2023, everything is changing. The information frontline is no less important than military actions, which is well understood by Russian propagandists. That is why they throw powerful forces at the division of Ukrainian society, trying to use any excuse to shake the situation in Ukraine from the inside in their favor. Currently, the main trends of Russian propaganda are Nazis in Ukraine, legitimization of invasion, fraternal nations, conspiracy theories, ideas of fraternal nations, manipulations regarding the occupation, and others. And then, in fact, we understand that disinformation is a big challenge, not only in times of war, but also in times of peace. This is a universal and global problem that leads to social tension. Disinformation is used not only to deceive the enemy on the battlefield, but also in dirty PR. There are various ways to fight it. To filter information flows and refute injects, to introduce censorship, to develop media literacy, educational preventive approaches can be quite effective. So as for the dangers of dissemination of Russian disinformation and the importance of developing media literacy among Ukrainians, it was emphasized by the experts in media literacy over the past 20 years. However, all those studies and projects, which took place only thanks to the support of foreign organizations of the United States of America, Britain, Germany, I mean again IREX, Deutsche Welle, in cooperation with the Academy of the Ukrainian Press. But everything is so nice, but in recent years, the issue of the development of media literacy of students and the entire population in general has been seriously raised at the level of state bodies. In particular, the Ministry of Culture and Information Policy, the Ministry of Education and Science. President Zelensky emphasizes this. So media literacy is integrated into typical educational curricula for students of general secondary education institutions, curricula of higher education institutions, etc. Ukraine successfully defends itself on the information front. For example, the country entered the ranking of the top 25 countries in the world in terms of cybersecurity, according to the National Cybersecurity Index. Ukraine has already gained considerable experience in the field of cyber protection and increasing the media literacy of the population, and can share this expert knowledge with other states, in particular those that are currently fighting against manifestations of authoritarianism. So the last slide shows the basic rules of a media literate person. I will talk about this in more detail at the workshop scheduled for May. So to conclude, I'd like to say that media literacy is the powerful shield from the fakes, disinformation, distorted information. As for me, it is one of the key skills of the 21st century without which no one can do. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Natalia. Once again, you kept it on beautifully, and this was really interesting material. I hope we'll have time to discuss during the discussion. I'll go ahead and introduce our next speaker. That's Maxim Yablonsky, whose research interests cover various areas from the history of Ukrainian diaspora journalism to the specifics of the modern info space. He has done studies on the history of Ukrainian diaspora publications in Austria and Canada. He's also interested in the ideological component in documentaries and feature films. His new research interest, and that's the basis of his talk today, is eco-journalism. And this is largely due to his parallel education in geography. So Maxim Yablonsky, we're really looking forward to hearing from you. And his talk today is entitled Eco-Journalism in Modern Conditions of the War in Ukraine.
Добрий день, американські колеги.
Good day, dear colleagues from the US and our Ukrainian colleagues. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. So I will not waste your time. Let us begin. As it was already mentioned, my topic is eco-journalism in modern conditions of the war in Ukraine. Eco-journalism as one of the most operational and relevant spheres of journalism under condition of war is no less important than political. All the issues which concerned global warming and the climate change, and also the stable ecosystems violation, nuclear security are becoming acute. Because of the military actions, we lose both human and natural resources. The pollution of the atmosphere, natural resources, in particular the aquatorium of the Black Sea, nuclear threat, are the relevant issues which are unfortunately done by the enemy. Fires, explosions, the pollution of the environment with metal scrap and mined areas, the issue which won't be solved for decades of years, has the high-scale character and will need capital investments for the recovery. Not everything will be able to be recovered, because at the territories with intense warfare, where the enemy uses the scorched earth tactics, we lose forever the ecosystems. So in the media, we can see more and more the ecocide as a crime of Russian Federation against Ukraine. In the presented by President of Ukraine, Vladimir Zelensky, Ukrainian formula, peace formula, at the autumn summit of G20, one of the 10 points is the need to protect nature and the requirement to stop ecocide. The international community, including the European Commission, says that Russia has to pay reparations for ecocide, so we need to document Russian crimes against the environment. On March 1st, 2022, by the order of the State Ecological Inspection, there has been created the operational staff to register, document, and make in order the unified register of damage inflicted by the aggression and invasion of Russian Federation in Ukraine. In March 2022, the State Ecological Inspection created the chatbot EcoShkoda to document environmental crimes committed by the actions of Russian Federation. So chatbot allows you to choose the type of the crime and to show different scales in the land, sea, and air.
Could you speak a little more slowly? I believe it would be easier for our interpreters if you could speak a little more slowly. Thank you.
Такі заходи засвідчують.
So these activities underline the role of the state and every citizen in the war, which is primarily called an online war. It's also problematic to register the damage to the environment in the areas under occupation. That's why it's hard to come up with the actual situation. The social consequences of ecocide are extremely difficult. After all, the impossibility of the normal functioning of the economy, like forestry, water management, and agriculture in the deoccupied territories, leads to the new migration processes. On the other hand, some of the enterprises that were relocated after Russia's full-scale invasion They were relocated to the west of Ukraine in Prikopatsa and Zakarpatsa. They produce further impact on the environmental situation and they create new challenges to the environment as well as to tourism and recreation industries. Therefore, the ecocide has a chain of consequences, and it's extremely difficult to take all of them into account. The impact on the environment in large industrial centers affect the house level of the population and the statistics on the diseases ranging from sleep problems and incidences on cancer and many other allergies. All of those diseases tend to have an increased rate, and it has to remind the society about the problems like that. And we should be using both the official and public institutions to underline those aspects. All this requires an appropriate level of professional competence on the part of journalists. The NGO called Internews Ukraine, with the assistance of UNDP in Ukraine under the UN Recovery and Peace Building Program, and also with the financial support of the government of Sweden, is currently implementing a project called Environmental Journalism. It's for the Ukrainian journalists. There's also an online course called Eco Journalism um, uh, without kind of extra things that are not important. The course will address a number of topical issues important for journalists, covering environmental issues, then effective state management in the field of the division of functions, the available tools, wastes, and circular economy, natural resources, and environmental management. So the purpose of the program is not only relevant, but it also designed for the future. Another important component of today's environment is the disinformation and psychological operations on environment issues. And that includes the fakes about birds. Maybe you've heard about this, as if birds were carrying biological weapons, about these secret biological laboratories in Ukraine, that also blackmail and pressure with the man-made catastrophes, including nuclear catastrophes. In October 2022, the Russian Defense Minister Shoigu told his colleagues around the world uh, uh, as if there is a possibility or of using a dirty bomb by the Ukrainian government. According to the Ukrainian Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba, we don't have any dirty bombs and we're not planning to have any. And then Russians often accuse others of what they're planning to do by themselves. So in January this year, Russian intelligence spread disinformation about the alleged storage of weapons and ammunition provided by partners to Ukraine on the territory of the Rivne nuclear power plant. That's according to the Center for Countering Disinformation. This fake news has appeared when IAEA started their own mission in Rivne nuclear power plant. By publishing such information, the enemy may be preparing grounds for concealing future crimes. These are the components of Russian propaganda, and we need to counter them in a very proper manner. These factors uh, make informational tasks of inner journalism even more important. That is why the Ministry of Environmental Protection and Natural Resources of Ukraine, as well as the Center for Countering Disinformation at the NSDCU, they provide verified information that needs to be distributed via mass media. Another important thing is the speeches in the media and on television channels by representatives of the Ministry of Environmental Protection and Natural Resources of Ukraine and other structures, and also social advertising videos that address radiation safety and many other topics. In January 2023, there was a statement that the damage sustained by the Ukrainian environment is estimated at 35.3 billion US dollars. That's according to the Minister of Defense of Ukraine. And the Energy Minister, Herman Halushenko, said that Ukraine has lost around 90% of its wind and up to 40% of its solar generation capacities. On January 20, 2023, during the United News Marathon, the Minister of Environment and Natural Resources reported on measures to restore the natural reserves and natural parks, and also on the National Nature Park Holy Mountains, that's in the southern part of the Donetsk region. Unfortunately, the territory of the park is destroyed by 80%. The buildings and equipment have, like almost 100% of them are destroyed, and many forestries have been destroyed also by fire. It's difficult to talk about ecosystem restoration in frontline zone when it's impossible to guarantee the safety of employees. And from time to time, the media informs on the amount of damage caused by Russia to the environment. In February, the mass media has informed on the amount of 2 trillion hryvnia. Then in since February 24, 2022, almost 900 natural reserve sites have been affected by by different types. 8 natural reserves, 2 biosphere reserves have been occupied. Nearly 600 species of animals, over 750 species of plants and fungi listed into the Red Book of Ukraine are under threat. Now, because of the Black Sea impact in Russia, that has a threat to dolphins, and the because of Russia's offensive, half of Europe's rivers may dry up next summer. Problems with potable water and pure water purity in Ukraine have been exasperated because the occupiers have been blowing lots of facilities in Kherson region, and that causes tons of oil and fuel to inflow to the river of Dnieper. And we're talking not only about the worse quality of water, but as the result of the shelling of the Kakhovka hydroelectric power plant, it is causing a significant drop of water levels, which has a direct impact on the supply of drinking water. So that fish have begun to die, and this could lead into the disruption of the spawning season of 2023. Prosecutor's office has initiated criminal proceedings, criminal investigation. Then, on January 25, 2023, on the mass media, there was an interview all about the calculation of the damage caused by the Russian army to the environment. The minister emphasized that the amount of damage is growing on a daily basis because the combat operations continue, and we continue process the facts that are taking place. Currently, the amount of damages exceeds 47 billion US dollars. And this is also taking into account how much damage the occupiers are causing today by illegally taking water through the North Crimean Canal. The Russians have deliberately destroyed the hydraulic structure, allowing them to steal water through the North Crimean Canal. The minister emphasized that every cubic meter of water which is illegally supplied today, all of them are recorded. Now, that's a direct case that can make the perpetrators accountable. After the invasion, the nuclear security issue has become exasperated. The seizure of the Chernobyl nuclear plant and the unprofessional actions of the invaders increased psychological tension in the society, especially since the chronicle of the events after the 1986 Chernobyl disaster, including the helplessness of the then Soviet government, has been preserved in the collective memory. Information about the fires and the exclusion zone and the heroism of the Chernobyl NPP personnel who continued to work, ensuring nuclear safety of all elements and systems of the plant, Only on March 20, it was possible to carry out a partial rotation of the personnel, and that was under significant tension as occupiers turned the nuclear facility into a military base. After the liberation of the Kiev region, a number of reports depicted the looting of Chernobyl NPP. According to the Ministry of Environment Protection, over the 35 days of the occupation of the exclusion zone, the invaders have inflicted damage worth of almost 3 billion Ukrainian hryvnia. They've destroyed 100 units of expensive analytical equipment and damaged 133 radiation sources.
I'm not sure how long our interpreters can be with us today. So if you could wrap up in the next couple minutes.
Добре, тобто ви зрозуміли, що є проблеми
Okay.
і
So you've understood that there are many problems related to the environment because of national reserves and biosphere reserves. There's also a nuclear threat. There's the example with the Chernobyl nuclear plant, which is currently liberated. But another nuclear power plant in Zaporizhia is captured. There's many challenges and issues related to that. In the beginning of the invasion, there were shelling of the nuclear power plant facility. We don't know the level of damages inflicted because the international experts of the IAEA are prevented from accessing this nuclear power plant. There's constant problems with the electricity supply to this station as well. So that's a significant threat not only to our country, but to the whole Europe. In addition to nuclear threat, I would also underline the importance or the issue of mined territories, because Ukraine is considered the most contaminated countries in the world, contaminated with mines. The situation is much graver than in Afghanistan and Iraq. So that's another issue, which is the demining of territories. And after that, when all those consequences will be properly appreciated and registered, we would need to establish the eco kind of consciousness and the first steps that were made in Ukraine. That was the replacement of the old electric bulbs to the new bulbs, LED lamps, I would say. So it's a small step, but it's still a kind of a one step towards the energy safety of Ukraine. So the military component has direct impact on the environment. It not only actualizes environmental problems, but it also demonstrates new challenges and threats on a daily basis, while at the same time, it shapes the responsibility for the future. And the task of eco-journalism is not only to cover this process, but also to, establish them, to generate them.
Really interesting and important presentation. I have news from our interpreters that they will have to leave us in 6 minutes. And so I propose that we quickly start our discussion. And then after the interpreters have to leave, we'll just carry on in Ukrainian and or English as best we can. So we've heard 4 wonderful papers about representation, about symbols, about the politics of space, about the importance of the media in sharing accurate information about the war, and also the dangers of disinformation, which we're all very familiar with, and which Natalia summed up very well. So I wonder if any of the presenters have questions or comments for your fellow presenters, anything that you would like to ask or emphasize before we open up the floor to the audience. So Mykola, Irina, Natalia, Maxim, anything you'd like to ask your fellow presenters or share? Okay, I'll take that as a no. So why don't we open the floor up to anyone who has questions or commentary, would like to reflect on these papers ask questions, offer your own examples for discussion. You can raise your hand using the raise hand function, or if that's not convenient, you can put your question in the chat. Yes, Nadia Huncharenko, please.
Thank you. Thank you for these interesting briefings. And I'd like to have a question to Mykola. When you're analyzing all of this propaganda, the Russian propaganda that you've seen while being under occupation, you said that these three discourse, the Russian, the Soviet, they are kind of they affect one another. They kind of diminish one another, but I think they reinforce one another. They complement this. That these are three important components that are sharing the elements of the imperial Soviet and current Russian motives, and they're turning this propaganda into something that covers a wider spectrum of users. Thank you. Mykola, I guess you're on mute. Yes, I was also thinking about this topic, but I came to a conclusion that these discourses, in fact, diminish one another or affect one another, because the first two of them, they are sort of something they're outside of reality. Whenever we are talking about non-existent populated areas or the non-existent name of the streets in non-existent countries, it's hard to persuade the users of this information or the consumers of this information of this fact. And secondly, I mentioned the quote by two of the Russian propagandists, this Hirkin and the less known Mikhailov, and they felt sorry because there's too much Soviet in this discourse, and that takes a lot of the time on the air, and that takes a lot of the attention among the Russian people. So that was the thought expressed by the Russians itself, and that made me make the conclusions they are presented. Thank you. It's clear.
Maxim, please. Go ahead.
В мене так само питання до пана Миколи.
And I also have a question to Mykola on the issue of toponymics. There's kind of a problem that they try to compare the Russian and Soviet vision with the Soviet one. And for this to coexist, do you think it's normal? How would you assess this phenomena? In my article, and I'm currently preparing this article with my partner from the University of Indiana, we come to a conclusion that the people that are actively involved or were actively involved, they were coming to Ukraine in order to fulfill those purposes that they are being provided from implementation in Russia. So someone wants to restore the Russian Empire, and they're not being given a chance to do that in Russia. Because, well, the system they have currently in Russia, it's not an imperial. Or they're willing to go to Ukraine or to rebuild the Soviet Union. Or the community of the total welfare or the common welfare. So in this respect, it kind of shows the that oh, sorry, I need to once again refer to the question. And at this point, the interpreters are saying goodbye to you and have a nice day.
вони їдуть реалізовувати свої мрії в іншій державі. Тобто так воно поєднується, воно дійсно, якби, якщо брати в сукупну, то не поєднуються, а як якісь персональні історії, персональні стратегії, то виходить, що вони реалізовуються окремо одна від іншої.
Тобто кожен чує те, що хоче, так?
Власне, так. Тобто людина везе в Україну прапор такий, який вона захоче. А це, я тільки так сказав, радянський, імперський та російський, але це не весь перелік. Ще везуть і дагестанські прапори, і осетинські прапори, і прапори своїх громадських організацій. Тобто це дуже дивно було, між іншим, спостерігати ось те, що або чеченські прапори, так. Відповідно, те, що не дають чеченцю зробити там, чи осетину, чи дагестанцю в себе, в своїй республіці, вони приїжджають це робити в Україні. І це проявляється саме в символічній поведінці, так, використанні різних символів.
Дякую.
So as I mentioned in the chat, our interpreters have signed off, so we are on our own. I'm going to take the chair's privilege to ask a question, if that's okay. I'll do it in English, and then maybe, I don't know, Svetlana, maybe you could give the gist of it. I'll be very quick. I'm fascinated by the methods of Mykola and Irina, especially. You have such wonderful and unique material, and in many ways it's ephemeral material. So I'd love to know how you have gone about systematically collecting your data, and perhaps creating a database that will live on, so that others can research these important questions as well. Irina, you mentioned that you are working on a database, and I'd love to hear more about that. And Mykola, I'd love to know what kind of database you've been able to build, perhaps.
Чи ви розумієте, пані Ірино?
Yes.
Добре, добре.
I decided to use 4 types of sources: toponymy, coat of arms, and the third source is flags, national flags, and outdoor advertising. And I systematically collected any references from my individual observations and from the digital sources, from internet sources.
Thank you. Irina, would you be willing to tell us more about the database?
Yes, thank you, dear sir. Yes, I work on the archive of the Minister of Culture. We made a mediatek. So we have more than 50 volunteers who work with curators, with us. So they search every day for information, for some new information, new artists and new artworks. I also have my personal database and also the database of my NGO, Art Research Platform Mokonshu. So we have really huge materials, so it's thousands of artworks, and we have a website where we put all this information, and it is every day some volunteers put some more information to the database, so it's grows every day.
Wonderful. It's such a great project. I would love to have the website. If you could put it in the chat for everyone, that would be great.
Yeah, no, I will make it.
Thank you.
Just a few moments, I will find.
Oh, sure. I know everyone is tired. It's been a long day, a very stimulating day, but I do want to give you the chance to ask any questions or provide any feedback you'd like to before we sign off and ruminate on everything that we've learned and discussed today and come back tomorrow for day 3 of our conference. Є
I
ще?
put the link to the chat.
Thank you, дякую. Мгм.
Thank you.
Є ще питання, додатки? Всі хочуть спати.
Їсти.
Їсти. Well, again, dear colleagues, it's wonderful, wonderful to see you all today. We wish you a safe and peaceful evening. And we look forward to seeing those of you who can come back tomorrow. And thank you for being such a wonderful community and sharing your research with us. Svetlana, do you have any comments before we say goodbye?
No, just I'm looking forward to tomorrow's session. З нетерпінням чекаю завтра наших сесій. Так.
Mhm.
Хтось уже знову
Да.
у кімнаті очікування.
Okay, well, тоді до завтра.
До завтра, спасибі, дорогі колеги,
До побачення.
прихильники України, українських студій, наших українських учених. Велика вам подяка за те, що долучилися до нас.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
See you tomorrow.
Tomorrow.
Дякуємо. Дякуємо організаторам.
Дуже дякую. До побачення.
До побачення. До завтра.
Побачення.
Дякую всім, до побачення.
До побачення.
Бачення.
До побачення. До побачення. Bye.
Bye.